Well, color me surprised. This is the first time we're actually seeing a plot that goes beyond the scope of the typical 3-issue arcs we usually get in these issues. The second issue followed up fairly well on the momentum of the first, but we have to ask ourselves about how they'll be able to bring all of those disparate plots together. The cover here is again pretty good, and is more on the level of what we saw with issue 7, just facing the opposite direction. Also, the choice of characters is a bit of a surprise. Of course we have Knuckles there, but we also have General Stryker and Remington, two characters who have had pretty minor impacts on the current story thus far. They do still look good, though. The book itself opens on Enerjack returning to the Dark Legion, telling them that they'll essentially be charging Echidnapolis head-on, with him leading the charge. When asked about Knuckles, he assures Kragok that he has been taken care of, much to the worry of Julie Sue, who is piloting Kragok's personal vehicle. As they drive off, we see what happened to the Chaotix. They've been tied down to the desert sands, out in the open, for a slow death via the heat of the sun. Particularly cruel when you think about it. Cut over to Knuckles, who suddenly appears out of the ether, completely reconstituted. And who should be there but a Fair, who's looking a lot more Knuckles-like than he did before, who says that he's been brought back by the will of the ancient walkers, though why they did that, they aren't saying. Instead of explaining anything to him, because why start now, they send out a giant crow which swoops down towards him, and then he mystically appears back in the desert right next to the Chaotix. But we don't want to linger on that scene, we gotta see what's happening over in Echidnapolis. The troops are rallying, getting ready to meet the Dark Legion forces, but Remington gets a call telling him that their own forces might not be enough, a sentiment he agrees with, and then goes to meet with the Dingoes, convincing them to assist in putting down the Legion. Meanwhile, back in the desert, Knuckles frees the Chaotix, sans Charmy, and they happen to find a canteen half buried in the sand nearby. While the Chaotix drink, Knuckles is given a vision from Archimedes, who apparently manages to get through to Knuckles temporarily. The Echidna starts to poke around the sand and finds the capsule holding the two fire ants, and... Charmy? Wait, what? I'm willing to bet that the writer or artists just completely forgot about him. He even makes a quip about them forgetting him. Of course, I can't say one way or the other if that's what happened, but considering that we weren't shown Charmy's capture, him getting stuffed in the capsule or buried with the ants, or the fact that no one has really brought him up at all during this entire time, I'm willing to bet that yes, it was a case of the bee being completely forgotten about. Back in the city, the tanks and saucers enter and start firing as Kragok states that they will take no prisoners, even ordering Julie Sue to ram into the barricade in front of them, even as Remington and the Dingoes start firing on them. However, Enerjack uses his powers to stop their weapons from working, making a declaration for them to surrender, just as he starts to disappear against his will. Before a panicked Kragok can give the order to renew the attack, Julie Sue completes her face turn by slamming on the gas and crashing his saucer before leaping out herself. Defying the usual conventions, however, the landing was rough enough to put her down for now, and we cut over to Enerjack, reappearing next to a floating mammoth Mogul. While Enerjack tries to attack him, Mogul just teleports behind him and taps him with the real Sword of Acorns, explaining that it can be used as a superconductor, allowing him to absorb all of the chaos energy that has kept Enerjack alive over the centuries, making Mammoth Mogul incredibly powerful, and leaving Enerjack as just a shriveled, old, powerless Dimitri. Knuckles manages to catch the falling old man before he goes splat, and then he and the Chaotix turn their sights on the Dark Legion members around them, while we cut over to Locke watching from his office, debating about whether or not he should step in and help, with his father saying that it's fine to want to help out his son now and then. But Locke decides he'll keep his distance for now, and only get involved if Knuckles, very obviously, gets in over his head. He does, however, put out a call to the freedom fighters pretending to be Knuckles, to get some help in dealing with the new threat that's been left in the wake of Mogul's involvement. Back on the streets, Knuckles and friends have the soldiers on the run, where Remington stops them and says that they have the situation under control, helped by the fact that they have both Kragok and Julie Sue captured now. While Knuckles looks surprised and Julie Sue looks ashamed, neither has a chance to speak before Remington takes off, back towards the jail, as Sonic and friends show up. Boy, that was friggin' quick. Saying that they got Knuckles' message, which of course he didn't send. And our comic ends with Sonic, Tails, and Knuckles being teleported away and replaced with Mammoth Mogul, now possessing the power of his Chaos Emerald, the Sword of Acorns, and the energy he stole from Enerjack, and declares himself the supreme ruler of all Mobius. I'll say it again, color me surprised. Granted, this series has set the bar low for just what I expect out of a good story, or at the very least always drops the ball when it comes to its resolutions, but here, well, it didn't really wrap up the story, instead just replacing the current threat with a new one immediately. The quality of this issue managed to maintain the same level as the first two. For the most part. There was a lot of ex machina in this issue, though at least some of it was foreshadowed. Mogul's intentions now made clear, it makes sense that he would strike when everyone was distracted by each other and use the situation to his advantage, and he was set up back in issue 7, so that's fine. Knuckles being reconstituted by the Ancient Walkers and then getting warped right to where he needs to be is a bit more narrative convenience for the sake of the story, but let's be honest, it's not like Knuckles was ever in any real danger to begin with. The sudden appearance of the Freedom Fighters was a surprise though, that's for sure. Especially since they had so much of their own stuff they were taking care of at the time as well. It did also manage, through those narrative conveniences, to wrap up most of the lingering plot threads from the first two issues, though some of them were just dropped without addressing them, such as Hawking's condition, and most notably Lorelei's attempt at meeting with Locke. I suppose we just have to assume Remington said no and sent her on her way, because we don't get any sort of follow-up on that front. Given the fact that the city was in crisis mode, I suppose it's kind of understandable, but it still feels weird addressing it in the last issue and then just forgetting about it in the next. Mogul at least comes off as a legitimate threat this time around, the first time I've really thought of him as being such since he was introduced. Though really he doesn't shut up when he gets going, that's for sure. Yes, the constant bubbles and constant thinking of the characters is still a big problem in this issue, as it has been for every issue of this series up until now. Not a panel goes by where the characters aren't explaining something, or laying out their motivations in text rather than allowing their actions or expressions to convey what they're thinking. Of course, when it comes to some characters, that's the only development they end up getting. Art-wise, it's once again handled by Gallamp, Poi, and Grossman in their usual roles, and once again they do a pretty good job, though I can't help but feel like their expressions are starting to slip a bit more in this issue. The wide-mouthed look is becoming a standard for most characters when it really doesn't need to be, and while they do a good job of allowing characters to express themselves without text, Julie Sue gets a few particularly good moments in this issue, I still find there are a lot of instances where what the characters are saying and how they look don't totally match up all the time, and it's becoming frequent enough that it is actively distracting. Also, some of the character designs have gotten some pretty radical shifts since the last time we saw them. Mammoth Mogul and Ether chiefly among them, with Ether losing a lot of the body type that made him look unique compared to Knuckles, whereas now he looks pretty similar save for his fur color. So yeah, that's quite a cliffhanger to leave us on, right? Bet you're all real eager to go into the next Knuckles issue to see where that leads. Well, sorry to say, we won't be continuing it just yet. Instead, we're going to be taking a look at Sonic the Hedgehog issue 54 and see what's been happening over there. See you all next time, everyone.